Hey guys, coming to you for day 2 of my accident story. It's crazy. Just in the last 24 hours since I posted my video about the actual occurrence of the accident, a peer and friend of mine reached out to me today who I unfortunately hadn't talked to in a while, and said that something very similar happened to him, and it's been even more years ago for him than it was for me, but it's really crazy because these major horrific accidents that you feel like, oh, you only see that on the news, once it happens to you, I feel like it became more prevalent in my life. Just, oh, my cousin and her best friend, something similar happened to them, or my uncle was hit by a drunk driver, or, it just, I don't know what it is about. After having experienced it, it makes it more real, and it also somehow makes it seem to occur within your individual community more. But I mean, still 20 years later, it's it's still happening. So I think I left off yesterday talking about immediately after the accident happened, and the fact that there were some witnesses from my undergraduate college that saw it happen and never hit the brakes and all that kind of stuff. And so naturally they called 911, or other bystanders called 911, and a local volunteer fire department, actually, I think they were the first responders, as well as DPS, which in Texas is the Department of Public Safety, but it's like in California, the Highway Patrol. And so turns out, because of this, 160 or so mile an hour impact that we had, Julie and I were trapped in the car. Couldn't open the doors. And so the fire department had to use the jaws of life, which are hydraulics, if you're unfamiliar with that, to be able to separate metal that has basically been crushed. And so I guess, and I, of course, was unconscious, found this out at a much later date, there was some debate about whether we should be transported by ambulance or by life flight. And it turns out that we were transported by ambulance. I think something about, by the time the helicopter took off, got to the scene of the accident, landed, we were loaded, et cetera, it would have been faster for us to actually be driven by ambulance. And I can't remember if I mentioned this yesterday. I don't think I did. But we, myself, Julie, and the offending driver, were all taken to what used to be Brackenridge Hospital, which was very close to the University of Texas at Austin. It's the only, or was, the only level 1 trauma center in our area at that time. So obviously that was the best place for us to go. And I was going to say closest. I'm not sure if that's true. St. David's South, which I know existed at that time, was probably actually closer. But anyway, that is totally besides the point. I'm unconscious. Julie's unconscious. Taken to the emergency department at Brackenridge, and I think, don't quote me on this, I obviously don't know for sure, I think in between when we were rescued from the car, put in the ambulance, transported, got to the hospital Brackenridge, I had gone into a coma. Julie, who, and I think this was revealed after, when they started to investigate what had actually happened, was looking at the Ford Explorer, which was the other driver. I was in a 97 Honda Civic that was hunter green with tan interior. It was the very first car my mom and dad got for me when I turned 16. I think they gave it to me right that weekend when I turned 16. And it wasn't actually the primary car that I was driving anymore, but we still had it in our family. I was driving, I was about to say Ford F-150. That's not true. I was driving a Silverado 1500 at the time, but it was actually in the shop. And so I had my Civic, my former high school Honda Civic with me while my truck was getting worked on. Anyway, I digress again. Julie was in the passenger seat. I was driving, and I guess, like I was saying, after further inspection, they realized that the offending driver may have actually realized what was about to happen before it happened and went to swerve away from us. And so, yes, the accident was a head-on accident, but there was more of a forceful impact if you're looking at the car on the left side, which would be the passenger side if you're in the car, than there was on the right side, which is where I was, the driver. And so another thing that I had going for me that unfortunately Julie did not was, since I was the driver, not only was there the hood, the engine and all that stuff that, you know, is held in the hood that makes your car operate, I was behind the steering column. And for anyone that knows about anatomy of a car, a steering column is very big, thick, made of lots of metal. And so I think maybe the combination of being in the driver's seat behind the steering column, and then that perhaps, I mean, and I guess we'll never know for sure if this is actually accurate or not, the last minute attempt to swerve out of the way to miss us, I guess caused there to be a bigger impact on Julie's side of the car than on mine. And so Julie was taken to Brackenridge as well. They were very worried about, I don't know if she had abdominal injuries or if they were just concerned about internal bleeding. Was taken to Brackenridge, made it into the OR, and unfortunately died during surgery, more or less bled out from her injuries. Obviously, I was much more fortunate in that regard, but I still had major injuries. I mentioned that on my drive I had begun to slip into a coma, and I was in a coma for, I think, 5 solid days. Let's see. I had burns on my face. Like I think I just said, it was a 97 Honda Civic. So airbags were a thing. Even passenger airbags were a thing. So we didn't have, any of these crazy, like, Lexus, Audi, like, door airbags and window airbags, but there was a driver and a passenger side airbag. They did both deploy. We were also both wearing our seatbelts. And that was something I was like, I hate to use the word Nazi for its connotation, but it was kind of accurate. I was emphatic, there we go, about, if the little light was blinking or the little dinging noise was happening when people were in the car with me, and still to this day, if people are in the car with me, seatbelts are on. We're not going anywhere. If not that I have issue with anyone doing that, but if somebody ever got in my car and wouldn't wear their seatbelt, they would be getting right back out. So we did have those things going for us, but unfortunately, the nature of the accident was just it was too extreme for Julie. And so I'm in this coma. Let's see. I have burns on my face. That's what I was saying. From the airbag. I have a major laceration in my left foot where, because the car was coming towards us from the impact, the floorboard of the Civic actually came up into the interior compartment, and a piece of metal like slit right into my arch on my left foot, and is pretty gnarly. Maybe about an inch long. I had a really badly broken right elbow. Had lots of other, cuts and scrapes and lacerations and things like that. I want to say I maybe had a stress fracture in my right wrist. Obviously the coma was the biggest thing, which in turn, the reason that I got that, or the reason that I went into a coma, was because I had a traumatic brain injury. So again, those of you that are familiar with human anatomy, especially the brain, the skull, what's under the skull, you have probably heard, if you watch any like medical shows, like the word spinal tap. That's actually like an old word. But in your spine and in your skull, you have CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, and your brain actually floats around inside your skull in CSF. And the skull on either side, I think it's 3 or 4, has 3 or 4 little bones that stick out of the skull and touch the brain. And so what happened during the impact, despite the airbag, right? Airbags are great. After it deflated, because the force was so intense, I still smacked my frontal lobe into my steering wheel. And so that intense jarring that flung me forward caused the little bones that stick out of your skull and kind of like gently hold your gray matter, your brain, in place, cut the side of my brain on both sides, which caused internal bleeding, which caused the traumatic brain injury, which caused the coma, etc. And so I think I'll maybe stop at that point. As far as talking about injuries and what happened in the immediate aftermath of the accident. I know, well, I don't know. I don't know what it's like hearing about, but I know it's a lot talking about and trying to think of all the specifics that are so very important to my story. So I don't know, you guys tell me what it's like hearing it. I know right after it happened, when I was younger, people really had a hard time talking to me about it. And then as time went on a little bit further, people were very cautious, and like understandably so, but very cautious about asking me questions when what I wanted to do was to be able to tell everyone everything. And so as maybe someone who's not connected to me or someone that is, what is it like hearing about someone else's trauma? Is it informative? Does it bring up questions? Does it make you uncomfortable? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I will get back to this story, I guess, again tomorrow. So it's like 12:30 here. I'm going to get ready and go to bed. But I will talk to you guys again soon. Okay, bye.